The frontier dust. The dust blew hard on the main street of Fort Laramie. On the frontier, the clatter of horseshoes and the murmur of conversations filled the air. Ethan Cross drummed his fingers on the hilt of his pistol, leaning against the doorframe of the Lone Buffalo Saloon, talking on the telegraph with a cattle baron in Chicago. "No, we won't back down on the offer. They don't accept the terms, we'll find another partner," Ethan said firmly, ending the call without waiting for a reply. That's when his gaze caught something from across the street, a woman sitting in the waiting carriage surrounded by 3 blond boys. The boys played amongst themselves, laughing and lightly pushing each other, while she gazed absently at a small book. Ethan swallowed hard. The world around him seemed to slow. "Sarah," he murmured to himself. He hadn't seen her in over 5 years, but it was her, no doubt. The same wavy brown hair loose over her shoulders, the same profile he'd so often admired as she slept beside him. But what made his heart race were the boys beside her. 3 blond boys with light eyes, from what he could tell even at a distance, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. And each one of them was a small replica of himself as a child. "Impossible," he whispered, his mouth dry. A cowboy behind him coughed impatiently. The waiting carriage had moved a few feet, and Ethan hadn't noticed. He sped up a little but kept his eyes fixed on the carriage. His mind raced frantically, calculating dates, remembering their abrupt ending, how Sarah had tried to talk to him several times afterward, and he, too proud, had simply cut her out of his life. Coincidence, he tried to convince himself. It can't be. But as he slowly moved forward, something inside him already knew the truth. Ethan abruptly veered right, ignoring the protests and curses of others passing by. He haphazardly hitched his horse, tossed the reins to the ground, and dismounted. "Sarah!" he shouted as he crossed the street, causing a hay wagon to screech to a halt. She lifted her head, her eyes widening in recognition and panic. The boys stopped playing, curious about the unknown man approaching quickly. "Ethan," she said, standing up and automatically placing herself in front of the boys, like a lioness protecting her cubs. Are they your children?" he asked, stopping a few feet away, looking alternately at her and at the boys who watched him with identical expressions of curiosity. "Are they?" "Yes," she replied, her voice firm, but her hands trembled. One of the boys, bolder than the others, stepped forward. "Who are you?" the boy asked, staring at Ethan without hesitation. Ethan felt something break inside him. The boy had his eyes, his chin. Even the way he furrowed his brow was just like his. There was no denying it. I'm a friend of your mother's," he answered, unable to tear his gaze away. "Ethan, this isn't a good time," Sarah interjected, taking the boy's hand and pulling him back close to her. "How old are they?" Ethan insisted, his voice faltering. 5.5, she replied after a tense pause. The stagecoach approached the stop, braking with a screech. "We need to talk," Ethan said, stepping forward. Sarah backed away, guiding the boys to the stagecoach door that had just opened. "Not now," she replied, quickly climbing the steps. "Sarah, wait!" Ethan tried to grab her arm, but she pulled away. "Come on, boys," she said, hurrying the children inside the stagecoach. The last of the 3 boys paused at the door and looked back, directly at Ethan. For an instant, their eyes met. The boy curious, Ethan devastated. Then the door closed, and the stagecoach departed, leaving Ethan standing in the dusty street, at a loss from the discovery he had just made. He had children, 3 children, and he never knew. A restless night and the relentless search. Ethan stood paralyzed in the street for some moments, watching the stagecoach disappear into the dust. His gold pocket watch chimed insistently, but he couldn't bring himself to care. The image of the 3 blond boys wouldn't leave his head. He returned to his horse like an automaton. A cowboy was arguing with another for being stopped, but Ethan didn't even hear him. He mounted and stood there motionless, as the town's movement slowly continued around him. 3 sons, my sons, he murmured to himself. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. In his ranch house a few miles from Fort Laramie, he paced back and forth, mentally replaying every detail of the brief encounter. Sarah's startled look, her protective stance, and, most importantly, those 3 young faces that were perfect copies of himself. The next day he canceled all his meetings. For the first time in years, the cattle empire he'd built from scratch wasn't his priority. Sitting in his home office at the main ranch house, he tried to find Sarah in town records, but she seemed to have vanished or gone into hiding. After hours of frustrated attempts, he managed to get her contact through an old mutual friend. "We need to talk," he wrote in the message delivered by a messenger. The reply took almost 2 hours. "I can't today. I am working." "When then?" he insisted. "Tomorrow at 4 in the afternoon at O'Malley's old barn. The boys will be at their riding lesson." Ethan arrived half an hour early, sitting on a bale of hay overlooking the barn. The place was full of cowboys and young apprentices, but he barely noticed the activity around him. When Sarah appeared walking across the field, Ethan felt a tightening in his chest. She was thinner, her hair shorter, but she still had that determined stride he knew so well.
"Hello," she said, sitting at a safe distance.
"Why didn't you tell me?" He got straight to the point, unable to hide the mix of anger and despair in his voice. Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "I tried. You cut me off. You told your men not to let me talk to you." "You should have pushed harder," he exclaimed, louder than he intended. "Pushed harder?" she retorted, her eyes flashing. "For 3 months, Ethan. I came to your ranch twice, and your foreman blocked me. I sent letters that came back. What else was I supposed to do?" Ethan ran his hands over his face, distraught. "You could have talked to my parents, my brother." "And humiliate myself even more?" She shook her head. "After I found out they were triplets, I decided it was better this way. You made it clear you didn't want me in your life. But it's not just about us. They're children, Sarah, my sons." "Whom you never wanted to know," she replied, keeping her voice low but firm. "You chose your business, your ambition, and I chose my children." Ethan felt guilt hitting like a punch to the gut. "What are their names?" he asked, trying to soften the conversation. "Caleb, Jesse, and Wyatt," she replied. For the first time, her face softened slightly. "Caleb is the most serious, born first. Jesse is the most affectionate. And Wyatt's the family's warrior." "What does that mean?" Ethan hesitated. "Wyatt was born with a heart problem. Nothing serious, but he needs constant monitoring." Ethan felt his blood run cold. "And how is he now? Is he well?" "He rides horses like his brothers. He just can't exert himself too much." She glanced at her pocket watch. "I need to pick them up in 20 minutes. "I want to meet them," Ethan said suddenly. "I want to be a part of their lives." Sarah stared at him with an expression that mixed skepticism and caution. "It's not that simple, Ethan. You can't just show up and become a father overnight. Do they know about me? Do they know they have a father? Of course that you live here, that you work a lot. I didn't lie to them. I just omitted the details." Ethan nodded slowly. "Give me a chance, Sarah, please." "It's not for me," she replied. "It's for them. I don't want you to get close just out of guilt or curiosity, and then disappear when the novelty wears off. They already have a stable life." "I won't disappear," Ethan promised, with more conviction than he had ever felt about anything in his life. Sarah was silent for some moments, thoughtful. "We can arrange a casual meeting at the blacksmith's shop. Maybe you can be introduced as a friend to start. We'll see how..." Ethan wanted to say more, ask more questions, but he knew there were limits he had to respect, at least for now. "Thank you, Sarah." She simply nodded and walked away. Ethan watched her go, feeling a whirlwind of emotions: guilt, self-anger, fear of the future, and surprisingly, a small spark of hope. That night, alone in his luxurious ranch house, Ethan Cross, the relentless cattle baron who had built an empire, cried like a lost child. Try it. The truth revealed at the trading post and Open Hearts. In the following days, Ethan immersed himself in an obsessive investigation into Sarah's life and the boys. He used his contacts, his influence, and even hired a bounty hunter to gather information, something he never imagined he'd do. He discovered that Sarah worked as a scribe at a small telegraph office in the town center. She lived in a modest cabin near the boys' school. There were no records of serious relationships since they parted. She seemed to have dedicated her life entirely to her children. In his office at the main ranch house, Ethan received the latest information from the bounty hunter. "So there's no man in her life?" he asked, nervously twirling his hunting knife between his fingers. "From what I could gather, no. A few casual outings over the years, nothing that lasted more than a few weeks," replied the middle-aged man sitting opposite him. "She seems to have a pretty fixed routine: work, the boys' school, home. On weekends, the river, or the fields with the children." Ethan nodded, absorbing the information. "And about the boys, did you get their birth certificates?" The bounty hunter handed him a folder. "Here, as we suspected, there's no father's name on the certificates." Ethan opened the folder with trembling hands. There were the official documents for the three boys: Caleb, Jesse, and Wyatt Miller, Sarah's surname. Sarah's surname, with no mention of him. A feeling of emptiness completely overwhelmed him. "Thank you. You can go now," he told the bounty hunter, who quietly left. Alone, Ethan stared at the papers for long minutes. The boys' birth dates confirmed his suspicions. Sarah was pregnant when they broke up. He calculated mentally. She must have been about a month along. Maybe she didn't even know yet. The end of their relationship came back to him with painful clarity. He was at the peak of his business expansion, working 16 hours a day. Sarah complained about his absence, broken promises, and constantly postponed plans. The last straw was when he canceled the trip they were supposed to take to celebrate their 2-year anniversary. "You have to choose, Ethan. I can't compete with your ranch for the rest of my life." And he chose without hesitation. He chose his ambition. He thought Sarah was giving an unnecessary ultimatum, that she would eventually understand the importance of that moment for his career. He never imagined she could be carrying his children. A growing anger began to overwhelm him. Why didn't she insist more? Why didn't she find a way to let him know? 5 years. 5 years lost. On Friday, the casual meeting Sarah arranged didn't happen. She sent a message canceling without explanation. Ethan tried to send a messenger, but she didn't receive it. Frustrated and determined, he decided he wouldn't wait any longer. The following Monday, he parked his horse near the boys' school. He knew from the bounty hunter's information that Sarah always picked them up at 5 in the afternoon. Patiently, he felt his heart pound every time he saw children leaving the gate. When he finally spotted Sarah, she was accompanied by the 3 boys, each carrying his small satchel. He dismounted his horse and walked purposefully toward them. "Sarah," he called out, stopping a few feet away. She froze in place, looking at him with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a low voice, pulling the boys closer to her. "You canceled our meeting and gave me no explanation," he replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "We need to talk." The boys looked at the stranger with evident curiosity. "Mom, who is he?" asked one of them, whom Ethan identified as Caleb, by his more serious demeanor. Sarah took a deep breath, visibly uncomfortable. "This is Ethan, a friend of Mom's," she replied hesitantly. "You're the man from the buggy," said another boy whom Ethan recognized as Wyatt by the small bandage on his knee that the bounty hunter had mentioned in his report. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, that's me," he managed to say. "Can we talk somewhere else?" Sarah asked, looking around at other mothers and children passing by, some casting curious glances. "Of course," Ethan agreed. "There's a candy cart around the corner." The three boys' eyes lit up simultaneously at the mention of candy, and even Sarah couldn't resist. "All right," she conceded, "but it'll be quick." The candy cart was small and cozy. The boys chose different flavors: chocolate for Caleb, strawberry for Jesse, and sprinkles for Wyatt. Ethan paid, observing every movement of his sons, as if trying to memorize each detail. "Why did you cancel our meeting?" he asked Sarah when the boys were distracted with their candy. "Wyatt had an emergency appointment," she replied, lowering her voice. "The doctor detected an arrhythmia. Nothing serious, but I was worried." Ethan blanched. "And how is he now?" "He's fine. The doctor adjusted his medication," she sighed. "This is our daily life, Ethan. It's not glamorous like your world of cattle and barons." The phrase hit Ethan like a slap. "I'm not here to judge your life, Sarah. I'm here because I want to know my children." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Why did you not push harder to tell me about the pregnancy?" Sarah's face hardened. "Do you really think I didn't try?" Her voice trembled slightly. "You decided to cut me out of your life, Ethan, and the boys paid the price." The silence that followed Sarah's words was filled only by the happy sounds of the boys eating their candy. Ethan stared at his own untouched candy, feeling the weight of the accusation. "What exactly does Wyatt have?" he asked, changing the subject. Sarah hesitated, as if evaluating whether or not to share that information. "A congenital heart defect, ventricular septal defect to be exact, a small hole between the chambers of the heart," she explained in a low voice. "It was diagnosed soon after birth. He already had surgery at 8 months old." Ethan felt as if someone had poured ice water over him. "And why didn't you contact me when you knew this? A surgery, Sarah?" he said, trying to control his voice so as not to alarm the boys. "I tried, Ethan. I went to your ranch when I found out about the need for surgery. Your foreman said you were in New Orleans closing a deal and shouldn't be disturbed. I left a letter. Did you ever receive it?" Ethan tried to remember. There had been so many trips back then, so many important negotiations. A letter, maybe the foreman had filtered it, thinking it was just another attempt by an inconvenient ex-girlfriend to contact him. "No," he admitted. "If only I never received any letter." "Well," she shrugged. "After that, I gave up. I sold what I had, took out a loan, and took care of my son by myself." Our son, he corrected more sharply than he intended. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Now they're your sons? After 5 years? Mom, I want more candy, interrupted Jesse, the quietest of the three, who now approached with his face stained with strawberry candy. No, son, that's enough for today, Sarah replied automatically. I'll buy it, Ethan offered quickly. No, Ethan, Sarah cut him off. Don't start like that. I don't want them to think they can get whatever they want just because you showed up. Ethan backed down, realizing his mistake. Sorry, you're right. The boys were now paying attention to the adults' conversation, clearly curious about the tension between them. Is your name Ethan? Caleb, the most serious of the three, asked directly. Like Ethan from the book we read? Yes, Ethan replied, surprised that the boy addressed him directly. Which book? Ethan the Adventurer, Caleb replied, with a small smile. It's cool. Ethan smiled back, feeling an unexpected connection. I liked adventure books a lot when I was a kid too, he said. Did you work with Mom? Wyatt asked, also approaching. Ethan looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly, giving permission. Not exactly. Your mother and I were special friends a long time ago. Before we were born? Wyatt insisted. Yes, before you were born, Ethan confirmed, with a lump in his throat. Jesse, the shyest of the three, watched the scene from a safe distance, partially hidden behind his mother. We need to go now, boys, Sarah said, checking her pocket watch. We still have chores to do. Oh, just a little more, Wyatt complained. No, it's getting late, she insisted, starting to gather their satchels. Ethan stood up, feeling his time was running out. Sarah, I want to help with Wyatt's treatment with whatever is necessary, he said quickly. We don't need your help, she replied, but her voice held less conviction this time. He might need specialist doctors, expensive medicine. Let me at least help with that. I'm not trying to buy anything. I just want to do what's right.
Sarah stared at him for some moments, torn.
We can talk about this later, she finally said. Now we really need to go.
Can I see the boys again? He asked as he watched her organize the children to leave.
She hesitated. Let's take it slow, Ethan. This is a delicate process. They're only 5 years old. I know. I promise to respect your pace. Sarah studied his face as if trying to gauge his sincerity. Next Saturday. We'll be at the fort around 10. If you want, you can show up there. Ethan felt a wave of immense relief. I'll be there. Thank you. The boys waved goodbye, still not fully understanding who this man was who seemed so interested in them. Jesse, the most reserved, cast a last curious glance at Ethan before walking out the candy cart door. When he was alone, Ethan took out his pocket watch and canceled all his meetings for the following Saturday. For the first time in years, something was more important than his ranch.
A father's journey and the silent confession.
During the week, he found himself consumed by thoughts of the boys. He researched everything he could about Wyatt's heart condition. He consulted the best specialists in the region, preparing to offer concrete help, not just money. He bought books on late fatherhood, on how to build relationships with young children. On Thursday, he sent a message to Sarah. I managed to schedule an appointment with Dr. John Miller, the best pediatric cardiologist in the region. If you agree, he can see Wyatt next week. The response took hours to arrive. We'll talk about it on Saturday. On Saturday morning, Ethan woke before his alarm. He chose casual clothes, riding pants and a cotton shirt, nothing that resembled the cattle baron. He wanted the boys to see him as an ordinary person, not the magnate who appeared in business magazines. He arrived at the fort at 9:30, more nervous than he'd ever been before any million-dollar negotiation. He sat on a bench overlooking the old fort, watching families arrive to enjoy the sunny morning. When he spotted Sarah and the boys entering through the main gate, his heart raced. It was real. Those were his sons. And somehow, against all odds, he had a chance to meet them. Ethan watched intently as Sarah and the three boys approached. The children ran excitedly through the fort's entrance, pointing at the massive trees and the old historic fort in the background. He breathed deep, trying to calm his racing heart, and walked towards them. "Good morning," he greeted with a nervous smile. "Look, it's the candy cart man," exclaimed Wyatt, the most outgoing of the three. "Hi, Ethan," Sarah said with a neutral expression. "You're early." "Didn't want to be late," he replied simply. Caleb, the most observant, stared at him with curiosity, as if trying to decipher his presence there. Jesse remained partially hidden behind his mother, casting shy glances at the stranger. "Let's play at the playground," Wyatt pleaded, pulling his mother's hand. "You can go, but stay where I can see you," Sarah replied. The three ran off towards the playground, leaving the adults alone. "They seem well," Ethan commented, watching the boys walk away. "They're happy children, despite everything." Sarah gave a small smile. "I thought about the doctor you mentioned, and I accept your help. The local healer we found is basic, and any better specialist would be welcome." Ethan felt immense relief. "Great. We can schedule it whenever is best for you. Just don't want them to know you're paying," Sarah warned. "I don't want to confuse them anymore." "Of course, I understand," he agreed. They walked slowly towards the playground, keeping the boys in sight. "How's life as a cattle baron?" Sarah asked, trying to break the tense atmosphere. "Busy, successful, empty," he answered honestly. Sarah looked at him in surprise. "Empty? I thought that's all you ever wanted." "I thought so too," Ethan admitted. "But I realized that professional success doesn't fill all the spaces." A shout from Wyatt interrupted the conversation. The boy had slipped off the swing, but was already getting up without crying, just with a slight scrape on his knee. "He's really brave," Ethan observed, admiring his son's calm reaction. "They all are, in their own way," Sarah said. "Caleb is the protector, always looking after his brothers. Jesse is the sensitive, feels everything deeply. And Wyatt, well, Wyatt faces life as a great adventure, even with his limitations." Ethan observed each of the boys, trying to memorize their personalities, to absorb everything he had lost in the 5 years of absence. "Can I approach them?" he asked, hesitantly. Sarah nodded. "Go slowly." Ethan walked to the playground, feeling more nervous than he had in any important business meeting. He sat on a bench near the slide where the boys were playing. It was Wyatt who approached first. "Do you know how to play checkers?" he asked directly. "I know a little," Ethan replied. "You like it?" "I do, but Mom doesn't let me play much because of my heart," the boy explained naturally. "But I can be the king." Ethan felt a pang in his chest at that innocent revelation. "Being the king is very important," he said, smiling. "Maybe we can play a little sometime soon." Wyatt's eyes lit up. "Really? You promise?" "I promise," Ethan replied, feeling the weight of that word like never before. Caleb approached, curious about the conversation. "Do you have children?" he asked, direct as always. The question hit Ethan like a punch. He cast a quick glance at Sarah, who was watching from afar, and decided to be honest without revealing the whole truth yet. "No, I don't have children living with me," he replied cautiously. "Why are you visiting us?" Caleb insisted. Because I met your mother a long time ago and wanted to meet you too." Jesse, the quietest, slowly approached, drawn by the conversation, and stayed at a safe distance, just listening. "Let's play in the sandbox," Wyatt suggested, already pulling Ethan by the hand. Without realizing how it happened, Ethan found himself playing in the sandbox with the three boys, helping to build an elaborate castle. His casual clothes were soon dirty, but he didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt genuine joy, free from the pressures and expectations of the cattle world.
Time passed quickly. When Sarah approached to say it was time to go, Ethan could hardly believe 2 hours had passed. "You can have lunch with us if you like," Sarah invited, to Ethan's surprise. "Nothing fancy, just a stew with bread." "I'd love to," he replied, feeling unexpectedly moved by the invitation. Sarah's small cabin was cozy and organized despite being modest. Photos of the boys adorned the living room walls, documenting every stage of their growth. Ethan examined each image carefully, trying to reclaim some of the lost time through those records. Lunch was surprisingly pleasant. The boys were already more comfortable with his presence, especially Wyatt, who wouldn't stop talking about his favorite stories and card games. "You can come play cards here any day," the boy invited while eating his stew. "Wyatt, don't invite people without asking me first," Sarah gently corrected. "But he's your special friend, isn't he?" the boy argued. Sarah and Ethan exchanged an embarrassed glance. "Yes, he's a special friend," she confirmed after a brief hesitation. The new routine and the unexpected truth. That Sunday marked the beginning of a new routine. Ethan began visiting the boys on weekends, taking them on simple outings, a buggy ride, an afternoon at the general store, a picnic by the river. Sarah usually accompanied them, keeping a safe distance, observing the slowly developing relationship. In the following weeks, Ethan completely reorganized his schedule, delegating responsibilities he had previously considered non-transferable. His foreman noticed the change, but he offered only vague explanations about important personal matters. The relationship with Jesse, the shyest of the three, was the most challenging. While Caleb was curious and Wyatt was naturally outgoing, Jesse maintained an emotional distance that Ethan respected, without forcing closeness. It was on a rainy afternoon, when all four were confined to the small cabin, that something unexpected happened. Ethan was helping the boys with a complicated puzzle, while Sarah prepared a snack in the kitchen. Jesse, frustrated with a piece he couldn't fit, began to cry silently. "Hey, no need to cry," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes the hardest things are the most worthwhile." The boy looked up, still tearful. "You never cry?" he asked with a surprising seriousness for his 5 years. "Of course I do," Ethan replied honestly. "Adults cry too." "Why?" Jesse thought for a moment. "Sometimes out of sadness, sometimes out of regret. When we realize we've done something wrong and hurt someone we love." Jesse stared at him intensely, as if processing every word. "Have you ever hurt someone you love?" "Yes," Ethan admitted, feeling the weight of that confession. "And I regret it deeply." The boy nodded, as if he had received an important answer, and returned to focus on the puzzle. But something had changed. A small barrier had been broken. As the months passed, Ethan's presence in the boys' lives became increasingly constant. He was no longer just their mother's special friend, but someone they looked forward to seeing every weekend. Visits extended to weeknight dinners, special school days, and Wyatt's medical appointments. It was during one of these appointments, while waiting for the results of new tests, that Sarah brought up a topic she had been postponing. "I received a job offer."
about Ethan?" Jesse unexpectedly questioned. "Can't he come with us?" The innocent question dropped like a bomb in the buggy. Ethan and Sarah looked at each other, not knowing what to say. "Ethan has his work here in the West, son," Sarah finally explained. "Then I don't want to go," Wyatt declared categorically. "I want to stay with Ethan too." "I don't want to go either," Caleb agreed. Jesse said nothing, but his eyes filled with tears. The rest of the ride was made in silence, each adult lost in their own thoughts. An unexpected agreement and the dawn of fatherhood. That night, after the boys were asleep, Ethan and Sarah talked at length in the small cabin kitchen. "They've grown attached to you faster than I imagined," Sarah admitted, holding a mug of tea in her hands. "Children are like that," Ethan replied. "They sense when someone truly cares." "What are we going to do?" she asked, appearing more vulnerable than he had ever seen her. Ethan took a deep breath. "I have an idea. I don't know if you'll like it, but what if you go to New York first, get settled, and the boys stay with me until you're set up there?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? You barely know how to change a diaper." "They don't wear diapers anymore, Sarah," he smiled. "And I learned fast. I can hire help if needed. It's not that simple. There are legal issues. We can solve that. We can get a document granting temporary guardianship. I know it's a lot to ask, but think. You could settle in quietly, rent a good apartment, find out about the school where they would study. In a few months, they would join you." Sarah was silent, considering the proposal. "It's crazy," she finally said, "but it's not the most absurd idea I've ever heard." In the following weeks, the proposal transformed into a concrete plan. Sarah accepted the job in New York, and they sought out a lawyer to formalize temporary guardianship of the boys for Ethan. The judge, after a tense hearing, agreed to the temporary arrangement, especially considering Wyatt's medical condition and the importance of maintaining his treatment without interruption. The farewell at the stagecoach station was difficult. The boys cried, clinging to their mother, promising to behave and obey Ethan. Sarah, with teary eyes, handed Ethan a detailed list of instructions, schedules, allergies, preferences, habits, what to do in case of a fever, who to call in emergencies. "It's only 3 months," she repeated like a mantra. "In 3 months, they'll be with me in New York." "It'll be all right," Ethan promised, trying to sound more confident than he truly felt. When the stagecoach departed, Ethan found himself alone with 3 pairs of tear-filled eyes looking at him, waiting for guidance. A silent terror washed over him. What on earth had he just done? "So, who wants some candy?" was all he could manage to say. The first few days were chaotic. Ethan temporarily moved his office home to a larger ranch house he had rented near the boys' school. The morning routine was a battle, waking 3 sleepy children, ensuring they bathed and dressed properly, preparing breakfast, finding lost socks, backpacks, lunch pails, getting to school on time. Jesse had a crying fit on the second night, missing his mother. Caleb began to test limits, questioning every rule. Wyatt had a fever, scaring Ethan like never before. But little by little, a routine settled in. Ethan discovered he could make pancakes the children loved. He learned to treat scraped knees, to apply bandages, to check homework. His pocket watch, once used only for messages and meetings, was now filled with pictures of the boys, of funny videos he sent to Sarah every night. Sarah called daily by telegraph, anxious for news and to see her children. She was also adapting, learning about the city, looking for apartments, visiting schools, getting to know the new team. "You're quite thin," she commented on one of these calls, observing Ethan carefully. "It's the parenting diet," he joked. "I never have time to eat properly. Are the boys doing well at least?" She smiled. "Caleb said you tell the best bedtime stories. I'd only read what's in the books." "No, according to him, you invent different voices for each character." Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Maybe I have a hidden talent for storytelling." It was during one of these calls that Wyatt, always direct, asked the question that would change everything. "Mom, Why isn't Ethan our real dad? Sarah and Ethan froze at Wyatt's question. The silence that followed the call seemed endless. The other boys also stopped what they were doing and came closer, equally curious for the answer. "What do you mean, son?" Sarah finally asked, her voice trembling. "At school, Peter said everyone has a dad, and I saw the old pictures in your room, you and Ethan together," Wyatt explained with the simple logic of a 5-year-old. "Ethan has the same eyes as us." Ethan felt his heart pound. He looked at Sarah through the telegraph wire, seeking guidance. "I think we need to have that conversation in person when I get back," Sarah replied cautiously. "But I want to know now," Wyatt insisted, crossing his arms. Caleb, always the most observant, seemed to be connecting the dots on his own. Jesse just watched in silence, his eyes wide, going from Ethan to the screen where his mother was. Ethan took a deep breath and made a decision. "Sarah, I think they deserve to know the truth," he said, gently holding Wyatt's shoulder. She closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, you're right. Boys, sit here close," she asked. The 3 children settled on the sofa, with Ethan beside them. Sarah looked at them through the screen with tear-filled eyes. "Wyatt, to answer your question, Ethan is indeed your father," she said with a firm but gentle voice. "Your biological blood father." "I knew it," Wyatt exclaimed with a triumphant smile. Caleb remained serious, processing the information. Jesse looked at Ethan with an expression difficult to decipher. "Why did you never live with us?" Caleb asked Ethan directly, always straight to the point. "Why?" Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I didn't know you existed. When your mother found out she was pregnant, we were no longer together." "Why did you fight?" Wyatt questioned. Sarah intervened. "We didn't exactly fight. Sometimes adults go different ways, even when they like each other. And when Ethan and I separated, I didn't even know you were in my belly." "And now?" Jesse asked, speaking for the first time. His voice was almost a whisper. "Are you leaving again?" The question hit Ethan like an arrow. He knelt in front of the sofa, looking directly at the 3. "No, I'm not leaving, I promise. It took me too long to find you, and now that I've found you, I'll be your father forever." A new family dynamic and reconnection. The following weeks were a time of adjustment. The boys processed the new information in different ways. Caleb asked many questions about the past, wanting to understand every detail. Wyatt was simply happy to have a father, like the other boys at school. Jesse, the most sensitive, alternated between moments of intense closeness and periods of distance, as if testing whether Ethan would truly stay. Sarah in New York faced her own challenges. The job was demanding, and adapting to a new city was not easy. In daily calls, she looked increasingly tired but determined. "I found a perfect apartment," she said in one of the calls. "It has 3 bedrooms, it's near a good school and a park." "That's great," Ethan replied. "The boys will love it." "How are they coping with the revelation?" "Surprisingly well," he said. "I think somehow they already knew or felt it. Wyatt now makes a point of introducing me as my dad to everyone." Sarah smiled. "And Jesse? He has better days and worse days. Yesterday he had a nightmare and called me in the middle of the night. He slept hugging me." It was... Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. Emotional. "I understand," Sarah said softly. He was always the most sensitive of the 3. A month passed. Ethan completely reorganized his professional life, delegating responsibilities, working from the ranch whenever possible. He discovered that many meetings he considered essential could be done by telegraph or simply delegated. The ranch continued to thrive, even with his physical absence. His house, once a minimalist and cold environment, was now filled with drawings on the icebox, toys scattered throughout the living room, photos of the boys in every room. It was chaotic and noisy, but also full of life. When Sarah announced she would return to Fort Laramie for a short one-week visit before definitively taking the boys to New York, Ethan felt contradictory emotions. He wanted to see Sarah, of course, but he also dreaded the moment of saying goodbye to his sons. The reunion at the stagecoach station was emotional. The boys ran to hug their mother as soon as they saw her stepping out of the stagecoach. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, hugged each of them tightly, as if to make up for all the lost time. Ethan watched the scene from a respectful distance, giving space for that family moment. When Sarah finally looked at him, there was something different in her eyes.
"Thank you for taking such good care of them," she said, approaching him.
"They're incredible," Ethan simply replied. "You did an amazing job all these years." In the cabin, Sarah was surprised by the warm atmosphere Ethan had created. She noticed the meticulously organized schedules on the icebox door, the school notebooks carefully checked, Wyatt's medicines separated and labeled. "You've truly become a father," she commented as the boys excitedly showed off their room. "I had to learn the hard way," he smiled, "but it was worth every minute." That night, after the children finally fell asleep, exhausted from so much excitement, Ethan and Sarah sat on the porch with cups of tea. "How has New York been?" he asked. "Challenging? Stimulating? Lonely," she admitted. "The job is everything I ever dreamed of, but these months without the boys have been harder than I imagined," she sighed. "And seeing how happy they are here, and with you, I'm starting to question if I should really take them." Ethan looked at her, surprised. "What are you saying?" "I'm not sure," she shook her head. "It's just that, for the first time, I'm considering other possibilities." "Like what, Sarah?" Sarah took a sip of tea before replying. "Like maybe staying in New York alone for longer and leaving the boys here, or maybe even coming back to the West." "And your dream job? It's incredible, but I realize dreams change." She looked directly at him. "Seeing you with our children has made me rethink many things, Ethan." He held her hand. "Perhaps we can find a middle ground, an arrangement that works for all of us." "Like a family?" she asked with a sad smile. "Not necessarily like a traditional couple," he replied carefully, "but as a family. The boys deserve to have both of us present in their lives in some way." Sarah lightly squeezed his hand. "We need to think carefully, make decisions with our heads, not just our hearts." "I agree," Ethan said. "But whatever the decision, I know we can make it work."
The unbreakable bond and true success. The week passed quickly. Sarah and Ethan talked at length every night after the boys were asleep, discussing possibilities, plans, and potential arrangements. They didn't reach a definitive conclusion, but agreed to postpone any drastic changes until they could carefully evaluate all options. On the eve of Sarah's departure, as she packed her travel bag, Jesse silently entered the room. "Mom, I don't want you to leave again," he said, his eyes filled with tears. Sarah hugged her son. "Mommy will be back soon, I promise." "Can't we all stay together? You, me, my brothers, and Dad?" Sarah looked at her son, surprised to hear him call Ethan Dad for the first time. "We're trying to find the best solution for everyone, my love," she replied, kissing her son's forehead. "Sometimes the most important things in life take time to settle." Sarah's departure from New York was different this time. There were no more secrets between them, no lingering resentments. At the stagecoach station, the boys said goodbye with strong hugs, but without the despair of the first time. They knew their mother would be back soon and that their father would be with them in the meantime. "I'll call every day," Sarah promised, adjusting Wyatt's shirt collar.
And will you bring presents? He asked, always practical. Sarah laughed. Yes, I'll bring presents. When she turned to say goodbye to Ethan, there was a silent complicity between them. They were no longer resentful ex-lovers, nor strangers trying to reconnect. They were partners on an unexpected journey, united by their love for their children. Have a good trip, he said, briefly hugging her. We'll be waiting. Take good care of them, she replied, before turning and walking towards the stagecoach. The following weeks brought a new dynamic to Ethan's and the boys' lives. Without the expectation of an imminent separation, they could relax and establish a more natural routine. Ethan learned to better balance the demands of the ranch with his son's needs, while they became increasingly accustomed to the idea of having a present father in their lives. The calls with Sarah continued daily, but now they were filled with discussions about the future. She had told the publishing house in New York that she would need a more flexible arrangement, possibly working part-time remotely from the West. They weren't very happy, but they understood. She explained in one of the calls. They offered a new contract, 3 months in New York, 3 months in the West, alternately. What do you think? I think it can work, Ethan replied, while helping Caleb with his homework. The boys could stay with me during your periods in New York and with you when you're in the West. And when I'm in the West, you could visit them whenever you want. Sounds like a good plan. Let's try it and see how it works. In this new phase, Ethan was surprised by how easily he adapted to fatherhood. Important meetings now had to fit between taking the boys to school and picking them up. Weekends were exclusively dedicated to outings in the fields, storytelling sessions, and checker games at the cabin, always with special care for Wyatt, who, though limited by his heart condition, insisted on participating in everything. His house, once a symbol of his individual success, became a true home. The children's rooms were decorated with their favorite characters. The kitchen always had fresh fruit and homemade biscuits. The living room proudly displayed their drawings. One afternoon, he received a call from his mother. "Son, when are we going to meet our grandchildren?" she asked directly without preamble. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't yet told his parents about the boys, not out of shame or fear, but because he wanted to first establish a solid relationship with them before expanding the family circle. "Soon, Mom, I promise. We're still adjusting to this new reality." "Well, don't take too long. Your father and I aren't getting any younger. You know, we want to enjoy our grandchildren." After hanging up, Ethan realized it was time to broaden the children's horizons. He had focused so much on building his own relationship with them that he had forgotten about the rest of the family. The following Sunday, he organized a lunch at his ranch and invited his parents. The anxiety was visible on the boys' faces, especially Jesse, always the most sensitive to changes. "What if they don't like us?" he asked as Ethan adjusted his shirt. "Impossible not to like you," Ethan replied, kissing the top of his son's head. "They'll love you the instant they see you, just like I did." The meeting was better than Ethan could have hoped. His mother, Mary, showered the boys with kisses and hugs from the first moment. His father, Jed, more reserved, soon found himself dragged by the triplets to show off his collection of toy soldiers. "They're identical to you when you were their age," Mary commented as she watched her grandsons playing with their grandfather. "Especially Jesse. He has the same observant gaze you had." "Wyatt is more like my temperament," Ethan replied, smiling. "He never stops for a second, and Caleb reminds me of your grandfather. Always serious, analyzing everything." That night, during the call with Sarah, the boys couldn't stop talking about their new grandparents, about how Grandpa Jed promised to take them fishing, and how Grandma Mary said she'd bake cookies next time. "Sounds like a success," Sarah commented, smiling at her son's enthusiasm. "Total. My mom's already planning Christmas, just imagine." After the boys fell asleep, Ethan and Sarah continued talking. "I've been thinking," she said more seriously. Maybe we should make this official. Make what official? You as their father, legally. Put your name on their birth certificates. Give them your surname. Ethan felt such a strong wave of emotion that he needed a moment to reply. You really want this? I think it's the right thing to do. They are your children, Ethan. They always have been. The legal process began in the following weeks. Lawyers handled the bureaucracy, while Ethan and Sarah prepared the boys for another change in their lives. They would now officially be Caleb, Jesse, and Wyatt Cross. On a sunny afternoon, a few days before Sarah returned to Fort Laramie for her 3-month season, Ethan decided to take the boys to the same fort where years ago he had discovered he would be a father. Sitting on the same bench from which he had first watched Sarah and the children, he now saw his sons playing freely, secure in the knowledge that they had a father and a mother who loved them, even if they didn't live in the same house. Caleb, always a leader, organized a complex game with rules only he seemed to understand. Wyatt ran back and forth, happily ignoring the limitations his heart imposed, living every moment with intensity. And Jesse, sensitive Jesse, would interrupt his play occasionally to return to the bench, check if his father was still there, and smile with relief when he confirmed his presence. It was during one of these moments that Jesse sat beside Ethan and leaned his head on his arm. "Daddy," he said, the words still sounding new and precious on his lips. "Do you think Mommy will really come back?" "I'm absolutely sure," Ethan replied, hugging his son. "And while she's away, I'll always be here with you." "Always, always, always," Jesse smiled, satisfied with the answer, and ran back to join his brothers. Ethan watched the 3 boys, feeling a peace he had never experienced in his years of professional success. He had made mistakes, lost precious years, but now he was determined to do everything right. Not as the perfectionist cattle baron he had always been, obsessed with results, but as an imperfect father learning daily from his children. His pocket watch vibrated with a message from Sarah. "Bought the tickets. Arrive Friday. Can't wait to see you all." Ethan smiled at the watch, then put it in his pocket and stood up. It was time to join his son's play. Be an active part of that moment, not just an observer. The future still held many unanswered questions, many details to be resolved. But the present, running after 3 boys in a sunny fort, was perfect, exactly as it was. 6 months passed quickly. The new arrangement between Ethan and Sarah worked surprisingly well. While she spent seasons in New York, he took care of the boys in the West. When she returned to Fort Laramie for 3 months, they maintained a flexible shared custody, always prioritizing the children's well-being. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Ethan's ranch was bustling. Colorful balloons decorated the living room. A table laden with sweets and savories occupied a corner, and a large cake with 6 candles awaited the right moment. It was the triplets' birthday, the first they would celebrate with their complete family. "Daddy, Jesse won't put on his party shirt," shouted Caleb, always the first to follow the rules. Ethan found Jesse sitting on the bed, still in pajamas, hugging his favorite plush dinosaur. "Hey, buddy, what's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside his son. "Aren't you excited for the party?" Jesse shrugged, not looking at his father. "What if people don't like me?" Ethan smiled, recognizing his own childhood insecurities in his son. "Who are these people you think won't like you? Your school friends? Your cousins?" the boy replied, still looking at the floor. "You know what I think?" Ethan said, gently pulling Jesse onto his lap. "I think everyone will like you so much they'll want to be your best friends. Really, you're amazing, son. Funny, smart, kind. Who wouldn't like you?" Jesse finally smiled. "Can I wear my dinosaur shirt instead of the party shirt?" "Of course you can. It's your birthday. You choose." When the first guests started to arrive, the ranch house filled with animated voices and children's laughter. Ethan's grandparents showered the boys with kisses and presents. Schoolmates ran back and forth. Newly discovered cousins naturally joined the commotion. Sarah arrived a little late, bringing more presents. "Sorry I'm late," she told Ethan. "The road was terrible." "No problem, everything was under control," he replied, though his tired face suggested otherwise. They watched the party unfold together. Wyatt led an animated game surrounded by several friends. Caleb patiently explained the rules of a card game to two cousins. And Jesse, to everyone's surprise, was at the center of a group of children, apparently telling a story that kept everyone entertained. "He's doing well," Sarah commented, noticing Ethan's proud gaze at Jesse. "He is, isn't he? He was so nervous this morning, just like all of us." She smiled. This is the first birthday party they've had with their father present. Ethan felt the weight of those words. "It still hurts to think about everything I lost." "Don't think that way," Sarah replied, lightly touching his arm. "Think about everything you've gained, everything they've gained." The afternoon passed with games, presents, and many photos. When it was finally time for the cake, the three birthday boys stood side by side, with Sarah and Ethan behind them. "Let's sing Happy Birthday," the grandmother announced, and everyone joined in an off-key but enthusiastic chorus. Camera flashes captured the moment. Three identical blonde boys, smiling before the cake, flanked by parents who, although they didn't form a traditional couple, had found a way to be a family. "Make a wish before you blow out the candles," someone instructed. The three closed their eyes simultaneously, each concentrating on their secret wish, and blew together. The room erupted in applause. Ethan helped Wyatt cut the first slice of cake, while Sarah handed out plates. It was a small, coordinated dance, as if they had rehearsed that moment for years and not just a few months. When most of the guests had left and only the closest family remained, Ethan found a moment to sit and rest. He watched Sarah organizing the presents with the help of his mother. The boys, still excited, showing their new toys to their grandparents. A feeling of completeness, something he had never experienced in his entire successful professional life, completely overwhelmed him. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever would be. Sarah and he still needed to work on many aspects of co-parenting. The boys would still face challenges, especially Wyatt with his fragile heart. But there was a certainty that no one could take from him. Those three boys were the best part of himself, the part he had almost lost forever. Jesse silently approached and sat beside his father. "Did you like your party?" Ethan asked, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. Jesse nodded, leaning against his father. "It was the best birthday ever," he solemnly declared. "Really? What made this one so special?" Jesse thought for a moment, with the seriousness that only a 6-year-old can have for important questions. "Because the whole family was here. You, Mommy, the grandparents, everyone." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "You know, Jesse, you're right. That's what makes a day special. Being with the people we love." The boy smiled and then, unexpectedly, threw his arms around his father's neck in a tight hug. "Daddy, this was the best day of my life," he whispered in his ear. And there, hugging his son, with the other two playing nearby, and Sarah watching the scene with a calm smile, Ethan Cross finally understood. True success had never been in professional achievements, awards, or public recognition. It had always been there, in his children's smiles, in the small moments that now filled his days. A tear rolled down his face, not from regret for the lost years, but from deep gratitude for the second chance he had received. And for the first time in his life, Ethan allowed himself to cry tears of happiness, without shame or restraint, knowing that he had finally found what he never knew he was looking for: an imperfect, complicated, and absolutely wonderful family. It was the beginning of a new journey, full of challenges and uncertainties, but also filled with a love that nothing could shake. The greatest victory of his life was not in balance sheets or contracts, but in the 3 pairs of blue eyes that looked at him every day with admiration and trust. And that, he discovered, was worth more than any empire.
An invitation from the West.
So, folks, what did you think of Ethan and Sarah's story? The winding paths life takes sometimes lead us to discoveries that change everything, don't they? If you've experienced moments of family reconnection or know someone who discovered children years later, share your experience in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with that special person who needs a story of new beginnings, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming content. By the way, I'm curious, which of you are watching this video as fathers or mothers? How has parenthood transformed your life? Tell us.